step one, which we've already completed yesterday evening, okay, was to assess the situation. If you step one in any home renovation project is to look at potentially what you're going to need to complete the job. So that's what we did last night. We got started a little bit, scraping walls to see what we have to work with, what we need to have in order to finish the job, and kind of what the workload is going to be. You know, you don't just want to jump into something thinking, oh, it's going to be easy, go out to the store, get what you think you need, come back, and then start on it and realize this is going to be a lot more complex than I thought it was going to be. So in this particular case, I kind of knew what I was getting into because, like I said, I've done wallpaper removal before. I've done texture removal before. But you don't really come across where you have to do both at the same time, you know. So that's something a little bit newer for me, you know. So step one was to assess the situation. And what I ended up doing was getting out a wide tapers blade. Now, if you don't know what those are, you can look it up online. A tapers blade is like a rectangular piece of metal about like this. It's real thin, but it's very stiff. It's got a handle on it. It's like a scraper, okay? And you use that to apply tapers, mud, joint compound, or spackle in a larger area. But what I did was I took that blade and I started, you know, getting into that hard coat. Okay. And as I assumed, it was joint compound. I kind of knew that's what it was because some of it would flake off the wall now and then if you're touching the wall, because it's more brittle. Joint compound is not something like cement where it'll never come off again. It's not like that. It's more brittle, you know, and if they have a little high spot, you can actually put your hand on it and, you know, just like knock it off a little bit, and you can feel it. It feels very gritty. It's very brittle. And it's not real strong. And you can also smell it too. You can also, if you're in the trades, okay, you can actually smell it a little bit and you'll know that that's joint compound just by the way it smells. But for those people who don't work, you know, in this industry or that industry, I don't do it anymore, as I said, but for those people who don't do that, you may not be familiar with what you're dealing with. But in this particular case, it is joint compound. The process was to scrape that away as much as I could and get down to that wallpaper, okay? And I knew it was textured wallpaper because there was an area by the door, I think I showed you in the video, where you could see the texture of the wallpaper that didn't have tapers mud on it. So once I got down to that level where I could actually get under, the wallpaper is also in layers. You have your surface layer, which is more of a protective layer and more of what you see when you have wallpaper on the wall. It's the pretty part, you know. But then if you go to peel that away, you know, if you're removing any kind of wallpaper, what you're going to notice when you try to pull it off the wall, it's going to separate. And there's an underlayer which is really adhered to the wall. That's where the adhesive sticks to. So when you go and peel that away, you're going to have an outer layer and an under layer. And ideally, when you're removing wallpaper, just so you know, I can do another video on this if you guys are ever interested in it. Just let me know in the comments down below. What you have to do is you have to get a wallpaper stripper behind the surface, the protective surface of the wallpaper. You have to get a stripper behind it to loosen and liquefy the adhesive. Now, it sounds like a complex process, but really it's not too bad to do. If the wall is sized, as I mentioned before, it's just time consuming and a little messy. But it's not hard per se. You know, the process is, again, like I said, what you have to do is you have to score the outer surface of the wallpaper. And what you use, it's like a paper tiger is what we call it, you know. use a paper tiger, which is like a little rolly ball with like little pricks on it, that when it rolls across the surface of the paper, it creates little perforations in the paper. And once you have those perforations in the paper, the stripper can soak into those perforations and liquefy the adhesive underneath. So what you do is you run the paper tiger over the wallpaper, okay? Then you start wiping down, you sponge it down with wallpaper stripper. And as you sponge it down several times, the adhesive starts to come off the wall and bubble. And that's when you know that that paper is getting to a point where it can come off the wall. You might have to do it a couple times in order to get that adhesive nice and loose. And if there's a tough area, you might have to like paper tiger over it a couple of times and then rub it with a little bit more stripper. But the stripper is a mild acid, like a citric acid type thing, you know, and you just wipe that on the wall. It's a liquid, put it in a bucket with a sponge, you wipe it on the wall. The process is to get that adhesive loosened so you can get that taper's blade behind the paper, and then you just kind of grab a corner and you just peel it away. You peel it away, and as long as that adhesive is loose, you can actually pull the paper off in sheets. The problem with this particular scenario, as you saw before in the video, the paper is covered in drywall mud, and I can't get the stripper underneath that mud. So in order to accomplish this, I have to use the wide taper's blade to get all that taper's mud off so I can get to the paper level, peel the upper layer of paper off to get as much of that mud off as I can, because the stripper can't get through the mud effectively, okay? So you scrape off as much of that mud as you can, and that's the time-consuming part. Just so you know, I do not recommend putting taper's mud over wallpaper ever. I don't recommend doing that. If you're interested in texturing your walls, and I can do another video on this if you want, just leave a comment down below. If you're interested in texturing your walls, there's a much easier and prettier way of adding texture to your walls. But this particular way, I do not recommend. You have to remove that hard coat, and then you can apply the stripper. Now, last night, you know, my wife wanted to get started right away. So what does that mean for us? I don't have paper stripper. I don't have it in the house, and I'm not going to Menards until later this morning. It's very early in the morning, by the way. So how am I going to solve that problem? Well, you can. If you're interested in making a DIY home wallpaper stripper, you can use citric acid. If you have citric acid in your kitchen for cheese making or whatever you do, it's a little bag of powder. You can buy it on Amazon, actually. You can use wallpaper, or you can use citric acid to remove wallpaper. I'm going to give you a little recipe on how to do that here. You basically take a half a cup of citric acid and add it to a bucket of really warm water, okay, and then add a little bit of fabric softener, okay, and maybe a quarter cup or whatever, or half a cup, and then you just stir it up really good. Stir that citric acid and fabric softener up, put a sponge in there. You might want to use a glove in case you're sensitive to citric acid. It's a pretty dilute solution, so you don't have to worry about it too much, but if your skin is sensitive, make sure you wear gloves when you do this. Then you use that citric acid and fabric softener solution on the paper, okay, especially the backing paper. It works really good with the back underlayer paper. You wipe it down so that the paper is very saturated, and then let it sit for about a minute, and then take that blade and it just peels the paper right off the wall. It really is a miracle. That citric acid is what the activated citric acid in the warm water and the fabric softener. I don't know the chemicals in the fabric softener that help, but when you use those two things together and then you apply it to the paper, it just dissolves the adhesive on the back of the paper. So it really, really does work. But citric acid, at least for cooking purposes, like if you're using it in kitchen and cooking, is actually more expensive than wallpaper stripper. So if you can, go out and get yourself, a container of wallpaper stripper, because that would be more cost effective. And I will be getting that this morning to do the rest of the job. But we started using the citric acid and fabric softener method, and it worked beautifully. It got that paper right off the wall. It did not, however, soak through the textured hard coat. So you can't get it to soak through the drywall mud and then a layer of, satin paint or whatever the heck they put on the wall, eggshell satin. You can't really tell it because it's like textured drywall mud, so the sheen on it is very strange. But I mean, obviously there is a finish added to the paint. It's not a flat paint because it does resist staining. You can wipe it off, but whatever they used, you can't get that homemade stripper through that hard coat. So you have to scrape that hard coat off first, and that's where the muscle came in. That's where the time came in. It took us 2 hours to do a little less than half the bathroom just to get the tapers mud off 1.5 walls. Let's say, okay, 1.5 walls. So that's what you have to do. You have to get that off the wall. That was step 1. Step 2 is now you look at your wall and what you have left to work with and see whether or not you have to do any repair work. Maybe you do have to replace some of the drywall. Maybe some of that drywall was bad to begin with, and that's why they wallpapered and textured over it. Who knows what we're going to run into when I get the rest of this room scraped out. And if that's the case, that's going to be step 2. You're going to have to get some 3/8 inch or whatever your wall is, drywall, and replace that piece of drywall. Or at the very least, you're going to have to get that joint compound and apply patchwork to get the seams back to where they need to be. Maybe you might have to screw down some areas if it's bubbled up and pulled away from the studs. We're going to see what that is when it's all done. And that's going to be, step 2. I'm going to assess everything and see what I have to do to get this wall ready for paint. Step 3, obviously, is going to be to sand everything down and get it as smooth as I can possibly get it. When you're applying paint, all right, I'm going to give you this number 1 piece of advice. When you're applying any kind of coating to a wall, paint, even if you put on wallpaper, the prep work will determine your outcome. The more time you put into prepping the wall, the better it's going to look in the end. The paint, the actual painting part or putting up paper or whatever it is you want to do, that's actually less than half of the job of refinishing a wall. A majority, over 50% of the work you're going to be doing is going to be prepping the wall. So your wall prep is absolute key in your finished product. So that's step 3, getting that surface prepped to accept a new coat of paint. And then step 4 will be actually applying the paint. You're probably going to have to prime the areas that you had to coat. If you had to put in patchwork or any sort of large spackling areas, you're going to have to prime that, because if you don't prime it, it's going to flash through. What flashing basically is when you have 2 separate types of surfaces on your wall and you go to apply paint over it, and the surface absorbs the paint in a different way, okay? So each type of texture will absorb paint in its own way. And when you have 2 different textures side by side, if one absorbs the paint more than the other side, one side is going to be shinier, flashier than the other. So that's what flashing is. You'll see it. Look at your house now. go ahead and take a look at your house right now, especially if it wasn't done by a professional, because if the last owner, or maybe you, if you didn't know what this was, okay, maybe you don't know what flashing is, all right? And that's okay. I mean, that's what I'm here to show you today. I'm here to show you how to do this the correct way. So maybe you don't know what you did, and you don't even realize you did it until you stop and take a really good analytic look at your wall. So go ahead and take a look around right now. Look at your wall and see, maybe you did it yourself. Let's just say you did it yourself. Do you remember an area that you patched recently? Do you remember an area the last time you painted? You say, you know what? I remember there was a big nail or screw in the wall, and I went over it with some spackle, and then I painted the wall, and it looks beautiful. Okay, great. And maybe it does. Maybe it's 90% perfect. But look at that area and look, go get up close to it and look, and then shine a little bit of light on it and look back and forth. Just look back and forth at it and see whether or not you can see your patch. And I guarantee you, most people, when you're painting a wall, if you are not a professionally trained person, okay, and this is not a diss to anybody, any DIYers out there. God bless you. I love you. Okay, you're not going to really see or notice those areas that are called flash spots or flashes. So when you have two different textures, if you're not careful, it's going to flash. So in order to minimize that flash, it's the prep work. Okay, the prep work is the key. And how you minimize your flashing, okay, number one is sanding. You want to sand whatever your patch job is as smooth as you possibly can. Get it to where when you put your hand over the wall, all right, you don't even know the patch is there. You just put your hand over it and you're like, I don't even feel that I put a patch in here. That is how tight you have to be in your sanding. You have to be very conscientious about your sanding. Get that stuff nice and smooth. Once you've gotten it smooth, if it's a large area, smaller areas, I mean, you priming every little small area would take you, as I said, a month of Sundays to do something like that. But larger areas, you want to put a little bit of primer on that. Put a little coat. Primer is a coat, a thin coat of paint that allows other paint to adhere to it better. Because first of all, think about this. You've already got a coat of paint on your wall. But the drywall mud or spackle or whatever you have does not have any paint on it. So what do you think is going to absorb paint better? Something that already has a coating or something that doesn't have a coating? Well, anybody can tell you it's going to be the one that doesn't have any coating on it. It's going to be able to absorb paint better. Once you have paint on the wall, paint by its very nature, okay, is a protective coating that you put on a wall. I mean, yeah, it's there for aesthetic purposes, but the real main purpose of paint is to protect the wall. Okay, it protects the wall from moisture, it protects it from stains, and that's why you don't put flat paint on a wall, because flat paint, okay, is very porous and allows stains to adhere. It allows moisture to get through. You'll know if you have flat paint on your wall because you can actually walk up to your wall with a wet washcloth. No solvent, no chemicals whatsoever. You just take a wet washcloth and wipe it down the wall and see if you have a little color on that rag. If you have any color on that rag, that is flat paint. That is paint that has no protective coating built into it. Just some flat paints that might have that nowadays, but a basic flat paint is not going to have that protective coating. So you're going to be able to actually wipe that paint off the wall, even though you may have painted it 5 years ago. But a satin, an eggshell, a semi-gloss, okay, those have a protective coating built into them so that when you apply them and they cure and they harden, okay, that protective coating stops the color, the paint, from coming out. And why is that? Because the molecules in the paint are not, they're tighter bound together, and they're not as porous, so the paint has a protective sheen over it which protects your wall, which is why when you buy paint for your walls, you'll notice in the store there is specific paint for ceilings, which is generally a flat paint or a paint that has less protective coating in it, because you don't really touch your ceiling, so you don't need all that extra cost involved in your ceiling coating. But your walls, that paint is going to be with a coating in it, or with a protective sheen built into it. Your eggshell, your satin, your semi-gloss, your gloss. I wouldn't put gloss on a wall, but that's just me. The protective sheen will protect your wall, as well as provide, an aesthetically pleasing look. So you're going to have to go out and get paint, for your walls. And I would recommend an eggshell or a satin, depending on what sheen level you're going for. We're going to be getting a paint for the ceiling. As I mentioned before, it's going to be either a ceiling white, what they call a ceiling white, or a flat white to go on the ceiling. I might not get a flat for a bathroom. My personal recommendation, because you're in a bathroom situation where there's more humidity, there's water that's going to be rising up as you take showers or whatever, there's standing water in the toilet, even that humidity will rise off of that in the heat of the summer. It's just a more humid environment, and that humidity will be able to penetrate through flat coatings. So I wouldn't even recommend a flat ceiling for bathrooms, but unfortunately, if you just have your contractor grade level paint in some homes, it's going to be a flat paint on your ceiling, because that's just how the house was built. And they put the cheapest stuff out there available on your ceiling because no one's going to see it. No one even looks at their ceiling but me. I look at my ceiling all the time. So I have to get a flat paint or a ceiling paint that has a little bit of protective coating in it for the ceiling to protect against the humidity of the bathroom. Then I also have to get a trim paint for the trim, because the trim is in horrible condition. I'd like to replace the trim, but that is more of an upper level project that I don't want to tackle this weekend. So if I do replace the trim, it'll probably be at a later date, and I'll show you how to do that without mucking up your walls too much. But anyway, so that's the steps. You have to get assess the situation. You have to once you've assessed it and realize what you have to purchase. Again, like I said, you want to get your for materials you would need for a job like this. You're going to need some sort of joint compound or spackle, depending on how bad the walls are. You're going to need paint, paint for your walls, paint for your ceiling, paint for your trim. You're going to need, obviously rollers, roller covers, paint brushes. You're going to need a bucket to dip in, or a little paint tray. If you're just doing a smaller job, you can buy one of those little paint trays. You can do that. But you have to get the materials, assess the situation. You need to get the materials that you need once you've assessed the situation. Then you have to prep the walls, get the walls prepped, sanded out, looking as smooth as you possibly can. And then you actually get to the point where you can apply the paint. And paint application I can go through on a future video. I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm just going to show you some excerpts, clips from what we're working on, which I'll be adding in periodically here, as you've probably already seen several of them. And then once you're done, obviously, is going to be your cleanup. So that's where we're at. With working on this project. We've already got started, as I said, last night, just to see what we were contending with. I'm going to be getting paper stripper today because, as I mentioned earlier, the citric acid solution that I made last night was fantastic for getting that paper off, but it's more expensive than if I were to just go out and get paper stripper. So I'm guessing probably about $40 to $50 a gallon. I haven't bought paint in maybe a year or two, but because like I said, I'm not in the trades right now. But I think last year I bought some paint, but it'll probably be about $40 to $50 a gallon. Don't buy the cheapest stuff out there, because the cheaper the paint, the less it's going to last, and you're going to be repainting in another couple of years. So get yourself a good gallon of paint for a bathroom. The size that we have, a gallon is more than enough. But get yourself some ceiling paint and also some trim paint. The last thing that my wife wants to do, and this is, it's going to be more of a challenge, and I don't know if she's going to want to be on video showing you how to do that. She's not really the video type, but she wants to refinish the kitchen or the bathroom cabinet. We have two different cabinets in there. We have the sink cabinet, okay? And then we have the cabinet that goes above the toilet. You saw that in the video. It's just a little cabinet that I hung on the wall that allows you to put shampoo and soap in and so forth. And she wants that in periwinkle blue. So she wants this bathroom to be white, which is just kind of like, happy wife, happy life. And I will put white on the wall for her. And then she wants the cabinets in periwinkle blue. So in order to paint cabinets, that is a much more detailed process, which is going to involve sanding to knock down the finish on the cabinets that came from the factory. And it's not real high quality wood. So the finish on there is more like a veneer than it is actually a wood finish. So I don't even know how well with that cheap of a cabinetry. You buy these things from big box store or IKEA or I don't know, wherever you buy your fixtures or your fixtures from. Unless you go and buy a top echelon $500,000 bathroom cabinet, it's going to be like an OSB press board with a wood veneer over the top, and then they have a very thick coating finish. And in order to get paint to stick to that, and again, I can do a video on that type of refinishing. If you are interested, just let me know in the comments. What you basically have to do is you have to knock down that finish, and then you have to apply a very special primer. What I use is one called Kills or Zinsser Bullseye. And what that does is it preps the surface of the cabinet to accept paint. Because if you just put acrylic or an enamel on a surface that has finish on it, maybe not the same day, but very soon thereafter, you're going to notice that it just peels off. And why is that? Because the surface of the cabinet or your trim or whatever has a coating on it, okay? And that coating resists anything sticking to it, which is why if you put toothpaste on there or you get a stain on it from something or other, you can wipe it off with a rag and it looks just like it did when you first bought it. That's what that coating, that's what that finish, surface finish is for, is to resist things sticking to it. So by its very nature, it doesn't want to accept paint. So if you go and put some paint on it, all right, without prepping the surface first, then the paint will peel away. You'll notice it. It may not happen overnight. It may take you a week or a month or maybe even a year if you put it on real good. But it's going to start peeling away. You're going to notice it peeling off, wearing off, chipping off, because that surface doesn't want to accept the paint. So you have to prep the surface correctly. And in this particular case, it's going to be a little bit more of touch and go because the surface is already cheap. It's a low budget surface to begin with because these cabinets were not, the bathroom cabinet was put in by the last owners of the house, so they didn't put in, they worked everything on a budget DIY, buy things from the big box store, bulk little package set where you have a, maybe $100 or $150 for the cabinet and sink combo, whatever it was when they purchased it, probably more now, but they're just very cheap. So you got to scruff that surface up real good in order to even accept the Kills or the Bullseye. And then the Kills and the Bullseye is a specially formulated coating that chemically adheres to just about everything. That stuff is miracle worker when it comes to adhering to things. So you put your Kills on, you put your Bullseye on, and you let that cure, okay, for a day or two. And that soaks in to most things. It doesn't stick to everything, but it sticks to most things. And boy, is it hard to get off if you get Kills on something. So you get that on there, you let that cure, and that is going to be your surface for finishing with whatever paint you want. You want to get yourself a really good cabinet acrylic or an enamel, oil-based or even latex-based paint. Then you can apply your surface coating. So she wants to do that. She wants to get these two cabinets in periwinkle blue. If I can bring you along for any of that process, I will, but I know she's not really one for, doing videos and things like that. So you might just be able to see the finished product. I'll show you the before pictures as well. I mean, you saw the before in the video that I showed you, but the after product, I'll show you a picture of that as well. You just may not get a in process unless I do some of the work. If I do the work myself, I'd be happy to bring you along. So please, if you would, stay with us. I will provide more videos when this process gets done, and I would appreciate it if you, liked and subscribed if you liked the information I gave you here today, and check out some of these other videos, and I hope you have a great day.